Hi, everybody, and thank you all for joining us with this Facebook Live session to discuss the Doctor of Nursing Practice program here at The Ohio State University's College of Nursing. Just to introduce ourselves, my name is Doug Hettich. I'm a program coordinator here with the College of Nursing, so I assist prospective students with all of the different programs we offer here who are looking into our programs. And I'm joined today by Dr. Randee Masciola, who is the program director of the DNP program. Today we're just going to be discussing the Doctor of Nursing program, its two tracks that can be pursued through the program, and what makes a competitive applicant for the DNP. If at any time you have questions, please feel free to use the chat box function. Our team is keeping an eye on that, and they'll be able to either answer your questions directly or relay them to us so that we can answer them as we go. So before we get started with my questions, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Okay. Hello, my name is Randee Masciola, and I am the director of the DNP program here at The Ohio State University. I am an assistant professor in clinical nursing, and I teach in the Women's Health Nurse Practitioner program. I'm also a practicing women's health nurse practitioner in Columbus at Professionals for Women's Health and have been for about 21 years. I also have a DNP from Case Western Reserve University, and my final project was on mother-daughter sexual communication. And I'm an alumni, proud alumni here of The Ohio State University. I got my bachelor's degree and my master's degree from The Ohio State University, and also have served as a preceptor for years before I was on faculty. And so I welcome all of you who have joined us today.
So to get started, if you could tell us a little bit about what distinguishes a Doctor of Nursing program from other graduate nursing programs and why a nurse would want to pursue a DNP.
So the DNP was established to have a terminal degree in nursing practice. So it is much more of an evidence-based practice degree rather than a research-focused degree, like maybe a PhD in nursing may be, which is historically a little bit more familiar with probably a lot of people prior to the nursing practice. Along with a lot of other colleagues in pharmacy and physical therapy, a lot of the providers are becoming doctorally prepared with a focus and specialization in actual practice. So in nursing, that would be nursing practice. And so really the goal of the DNPs is to implement the evidence-based practice that researchers have established based on their research. And there is a methodical way to make practice change or policy change. Also a QI change, quality improvement. So any of you who are out there who are nurses already, you probably work in an environment, you're able to identify pretty quickly maybe some practice problems or some things you're not following in your institution that's evidence-based. And think about how would you go about changing those? Find evidence to make that change. How would you actually implement that change? And so a nurse that is DNP prepared is an expert in making those changes, either on the clinical side or on the executive side. We also have an executive track we'll talk about today. So it could be from a leadership administrative change that you want to make in a huge hospital system like The Ohio State University.
Okay. And then in comparison to other DNP programs out there, what are, if you could talk about The Ohio State University's DNP program and what are some of the hallmarks of our program?
So that's a very good question, Doug. Thank you. We have 2 points of entry here at The Ohio State University in our DNP program. We have a traditional MS point of entry. That would mean someone that already has their traditional master's degree. We also have a BSN to DNP program, and that would be someone who has a BSN but not a master's degree yet. So we take both types of students. We also have, for the traditional students of what we're going to talk about today mostly, that means you already have a master's degree. Those students, this program is online, completely online in a synchronous format. And what that means is your classes will meet virtually online. It could be once a week, it could be once every other week, it could be a couple times a semester depending on the course. But the majority of the core classes are 2 credit hours, meaning they meet for 2 hours a week. It's pretty typical, but you can do that from the comfort of your own office or your own home. They're in the evenings, and so they do require active participation, but it does not require you to come to campus. We do ask that you come to campus for orientation, and then we'd love to have you here for graduation as well. We have world-class DNP faculty here at The Ohio State University who are specialized in EBP, evidence-based practice, and who have implemented hundreds of practice changes in their own institutions, and both at the executive level and the clinical level. So we have a breadth of experience here, from clinical experts to nurse execs. We have international and national partnerships. So our students can do projects anywhere from a very small private practice in an urban setting to a large institution like The Ohio State University, but also like the University of Illinois or large healthcare systems on the East or West Coast. So lots of opportunities to implement a project where it's important to you. Mm-hmm. We want the DNP to be meaningful to you. Therefore, we want you to be able to make practice change where you're at. You also get a personal advisor while you're here at The Ohio State University. You are matched with someone that will be able to help you fulfill your goals at the doctoral level. And so they will help mentor you and help determine your project and help you implement that project at your practice location. And that same advisor will be with you the entire time that you're here at the university. Our program can be done full-time. It is pretty rigorous to do full-time in 2 years, but can be done. And I would say the majority of our students do part-time over 3 years, especially if you're working full-time. That seems to be pretty common. So those are some of the things, the takeaways, I think, that our audience might like to hear about our program.
Okay. And now we offer 2 tracks through our DNP program, the clinical expert and the nurse executive track. If you could let's start with the clinical expert track. What are some of the maybe backgrounds that are desirable for a candidate for that option, and what can a student expect through the clinical expert track?
So as far as the clinical expert, what we're really looking for is you must be an APRN already, an advanced practice registered nurse. And so if you're interested in the clinical expert track, you need to be a certified nurse practitioner, a certified nurse midwife, a nurse anesthetist, or a CNS, a clinical nurse specialist. So you must be one of those 4 to be eligible for the clinical expert and have national certification in one of those tracks, and we'll ask for that upon application. The reason that is because we are looking to train clinical experts in the clinical practice. So if you aren't one of those 4, then we're going to talk to you about coming to get one of those while you're here, and maybe our BSN and DNP program or our nurse exec program if you're interested in administration. We'll talk about that a little bit as well. As far as the clinical expert, we're really looking at making a practice change from a clinical perspective. And I'll give you an example. Maybe where you're working right now is not using the most appropriate, most up-to-date evidence-based practice guidelines for Pap smear screening. And so you want to implement that in your practice. And so you need to prove to your institution why that's a better management decision, and how you would implement that change, and how you get buy-in from the important people that are there. And so that's what you're going to learn about, how to make a clinical practice change in the clinical expert track. So if you have a passion to make clinical change, that would be the track for you.
Okay, all right. And then applicants to the nurse executive track, can you tell us a little bit about what makes a good applicant for that track, and what sets that track apart from the clinical expert?
So the people who apply for the nurse exec track usually either are or desire some sort of administrative or executive leadership position, whether that be manager, director, chief nursing officer, CNO of a huge academic institution. maybe they have gotten some experience as manager at the master's level, but they're really hit a ceiling. And so they really want to take it to the next system level change. So now instead of making changes on your unit, you're interested in making hospital-based change. And so that may be more of an administrative power to get those decisions done, to be at the table to get some of those decisions made. Therefore, the nurse exec might be the right track for you. So you might not be wanting to be making change on a unit at the bedside, but maybe you want to make a whole hospital system-based change. Not even a hospital. If you're at Ohio State, you're talking 2 or 3 different hospitals. So it really is a huge healthcare system. And that requires the tools to do that, the change tools. Also policy, if you're interested in healthcare policy, a lot of our students apply for the nurse exec to give you those tools. You want to make policy national change, statewide change, and but maybe not clinical bedside change, maybe role changes and things like that. So that's going to lead you more down the nurse executive track.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that. Just as a reminder, if you guys have questions, please use the chat box and our team can either answer them directly. Do we have any questions that we want to address? No? Okay. Then let's talk about the application process. What are some pieces of the application that applicants want to start getting prepared?
So you really want to have a personal statement. And so that personal statement is really want to talk about why is it important to you to get a DNP, a Doctorate of Nursing Practice? What about it has drawn you to become doctorally prepared in nursing? And why are you seeking this advanced education? And I gave a perfect example just a few minutes ago. You've maybe been a manager on a unit and you've hit the ceiling. They want doctorally prepared people at the executive table. And so this would be the first step to how you would get there. What do you see yourself doing in the role of the DNP? And so let's, so when we're talking about the personal statement, not only where you want to be, but what do you see yourself doing once you're there? What change would you like to make? And is that a clinical change? Is it a policy change? Is it a quality improvement change? These are some of the hallmarks of the DNP program. And so we're interested, it doesn't need to be specific details of exactly what you want to change and how, but that you've identified and some areas of potential improvement in your current setting, and that you would like the tools to be able to make those changes. We're also interested in what sort of leadership opportunities that you've had in nursing and what have you sought out. And for example, maybe you have some global nursing experience. Maybe you've done mission trips to Honduras. Maybe you sit on a local policy board. Maybe you are a representative for your national organization at the local or state level. So all of these things will help build a stronger application of wanting to be a transformational leader here at The Ohio State University, and some of the things that we're looking for. And then really thinking about what your vision is of your career in nursing. Now, this is not something we're going to hold you to, but we want to know that you have thought about where this path may lead you, and that someday I'd like to be a CNO, a chief nursing officer, or someday I would like to teach in academics, or someday I would like to lead an EBP department. So, and I want to go back a little bit, because we didn't talk about we talked about what one of the huge advantages of coming to the Ohio State University DNP program. We didn't talk about the fold, which here at the university we have our very own Center for Evidence-Based Practice, and we have recruited leaders from all over the country who now work for us at this Center of Excellence for Evidence-Based Practice. And so that's pretty unique here at the College of Nursing. Another thing that is very unique that Dean Melnick was a champion for is you can become certified in evidence-based practice here at The Ohio State University. It's the very first accredited certificate program in EBP. And we had our first graduate, I believe, a month ago. And so it's cutting edge. It is very cool and exciting to be here at The Ohio State University. Yeah,
cool. Let's see. How about some other aspects of the application process?
Yes.
I think we get a lot of questions on. How about letters of recommendation?
I get that question quite often, especially if you're, practicing on the unit and you have been on school for a little bit of time. who do I get to write my letter of recommendation, right? I've been out of academics. And so really what we're looking for the letter of recommendation is who can speak to some of your experiences. So who's your supervisor? And so that might be one of the persons that you want to start with, whether that's a manager, a director, or a higher level senior executive member. And what can they say about how your trajectory so far? Where have you gone? What additional experience have you sought out? Additional training have you sought out? Maybe you've been to some leadership training. Maybe they've sent you for some leadership training. What unique continuing education things have you done to build your own nursing practice? And so a supervisor is always a great where to start. If you have any contacts back at where you got your bachelor's degree or master's degree, that would also be helpful so we can see what type of student that you were. They can address maybe some of your leadership, some of your professionalism, some of your accountability, things like that. Any special projects that you did, if you ever presented somewhere as a master's student. A lot of people present projects or diversity projects or evidence-based practice projects even at the master's level. So that would be something we would want them to speak to. One word of advice that I would give, because I often get asked to give letters of recommendation, is you always want to provide the CV to the person that you're asking to give the letter of recommendation so they can know a little bit more about you. And not be afraid, they might not know what a DNP is and what the DNP degree stands for. So having that conversation with them a little bit about why you want to have the DNP will just enhance their recommendation for you, so that you can really explain what your trajectory plans are, what your vision for the future is. They really do need to have firsthand knowledge, and the more specific examples they can give on leadership, experiences, attributes, really the better that the letter of recommendation is going to be.
Okay. Yeah, you mentioned your CV, and the resume and CV are also something that they have to provide. Do you have any advice there?
So CV sometimes scares people, and resume sometimes is nerve-wracking. A lot of people may have had the same job for a long time, and so their resume is not up to date. Wherever you have your master's degree from, including the Ohio State University, there are alumni services that can definitely help you get your CV or your resume up to date. You really want to highlight your experiences in nursing and anything that you've done above and beyond what would be considered maybe traditional education or traditional experiences. So global experience, as I mentioned again, that's one that we hear of quite a bit. Anything interprofessional experiences, any volunteer, any service, any policy changes, any committees that you may sit on. You really want to make sure that these things are in your resume. You want to make sure that there's no typos. You want to make sure there's no spelling mistakes. You want to make sure that dates are accurate. These are all things that almost every university would offer some sort of service for that. You can also pay to have your resume professionally done, and some people do that. But that shouldn't be something that it seems to intimidate people sometimes, but really it's just really giving us a easy way to see where you've come from and what you've done.
Okay. And speaking of things that are sometimes intimidating for people, there's also an online interview process for this program, which what are you sometimes looking for in candidates when they're doing their online interview? So the process for the online interview will be that you'll log into an online system and you'll be recorded answering interview type questions. It usually takes maybe 10, 15 minutes to do. But what are you looking for in candidates when they're answering the interview questions?
So that does spark some anxiety for some people. I know we get a lot of questions in the recruitment office about the interview. And so we do this across multiple programs, not just the DNP program, and have found it to be incredibly successful because and you might be one of these people that do much better verbally communicating your strengths than writing them in an essay. And, in an essay, it's really hard for your personality to come through. And so what we're looking for in that interview, it's not meant to be intimidating, but think of it as if it was an interview, if someone was sitting across from you and they were asking you questions, and how would you answer those questions? And so I think it's intimidating because we don't tell you what the questions are ahead of time. And so take a moment. I know some strategies people have used is they repeat the question back, and that gives them a second to really think about the question and kind of gives them a second to take a breath. And then talk to your camera just as if you were talking to someone sitting across from you. And how would you answer that? And how would you present yourself? You want to make sure that you're in the appropriate space, that you're wearing appropriate attire, that you have appropriate professional mannerisms. Think of it as a professional interview for any job. Most of the responses, we only require 2 to 3 minutes of talking, which can sometimes, you don't have to use the whole time, but most people do very well at the interview once they get going. It seems like the first question, they're a little nervous, but then by the second and third question, they're really getting the hang of it, and they're letting their personality shine through. So it's okay to be a little funny, professional funny, but you do want to, as if you were sitting in an interview.
Okay. That's recommendations. Awesome.
The other thing I was going to talk about is the verification of hours.
Yeah.
We get a lot of questions about that as well. And so you do need to have 500 hours if you're going into the clinical expert, which that should not be a problem for anyone who is an APRN, Advanced Practice Registered Nurse already, because all national certification boards require a minimum of 500 hours in your master's program to sit for national certification. So my students who are applying for the clinical expert all have 500 hours. They do need to get verification of that from their academic institution. The students coming into the nurse exec often have less than 500 clinical hours in their program for their master's program because it wasn't a clinical degree. And so we do work with those students to get them caught up once they get here, to get that 500 pretty early when they get here. So if you're going into the nurse exec track, that is something you'd want to reach out to our recruiters about how many hours you have and how many you would need and how we would catch you up, because you do have to have 1,000 hours to graduate from the Ohio State University for a DNP. And so that's non-negotiable. Yeah. The nurse exec, though, because of the way that most master's programs are set up, they all don't have 500, and we don't want to make that a disadvantage for you. We want to try to help you once you get here. How can we get those $500 under your belt relatively quickly in a way that's meaningful for you, in an experience that's meaningful for you? Once you get here, I do get a lot of questions about what those immersion hours look like. They're sometimes called clinical hours, but it's not like the clinical hours that you would have been used to in your master's program. If you are an APRN, those clinical hours would be hands-on, direct patient care hours. And so when you're in a doctoral program, post-master's, you're really working on immersion hours, and those could be in things like leadership, policy, health promotion, evidence-based practice. If you're not familiar with the DNP essentials, that's something that you can Google through AACN, and you want to look at the DNP essentials so you know the essentials that the national accreditors want us to have in our programs. What are we required to teach you to get a DNP? And there's 8 essentials now. Mm-hmm. And we want to make sure that you are competent in all of those areas. And so you will do some reflection to find out what areas you may need to build some tools. And those will be where your individualized immersion plan will be. So when you get here, those hours, some will go also to your project, but then some will be, maybe it's going to an OA, Ohio Advanced Association of Nurse Practitioners policy meeting, or maybe it's going to your own institution's policy meeting or a leadership meeting that you often don't go to. So once we get here, we'll give you plenty of ideas on where to get those immersion hours.
Okay, fantastic. Just some other pieces of the application process to touch on. Well, first there's the supervisor's letter of support, which is sometimes also a point of confusion. This is different than the letters of recommendation, which again, if you're asking your supervisor for a letter of recommendation, they also need to provide the supervisor's letter of support. And that's just an acknowledgement by your supervisor that you're pursuing the DNP program and that they support you. Yeah.
And that doesn't mean financial support. And sometimes it doesn't even mean that they'll give you any time or resources, although there are institutions that really want doctorally prepared nurses in their organization. So they will give them some admin time to work towards this. And so that is something you could discuss with your supervisor. But what we really want to know is that their place of employment is aware that they're seeking this degree and that they're open to the idea of them implementing a project in their environment.
Mhm.
And we'll talk with the student a little bit about making sure it's what is a priority for that institution as well.
Okay. And then there's transcripts. That's the other major component of the application. You may already be familiar with the process of submitting transcripts. You'll just contact each of your schools and have them sent over to Ohio State in an official capacity, mail or electronically. And you can find details of how to do that on our graduate admissions office website.
And Doug, a question I often get, if they're a student of the Ohio State University, they still have to have their transcript sent. Is that correct?
They do not.
They don't.
You will be able to access that.
I get that question emailed question quite often.
We as the Ohio State University can access your records here, and it's possible as well if you've done previous schooling with the Ohio State University and have had transcripts sent to here in the past from other institutions. Those may very likely still be on record here. What I usually tell students is to once you've applied, if it doesn't show up in your to-do list that those records are here on file, you may want to reach out to our graduate admissions office and get confirmation of that. But more than likely, they'll still be with us.
Great.
But if you're a new applicant, each individual school where you've attended, you got to get us records from. All right. Do we have any questions?
I do have actually a couple questions. Doug, can you tell us a little bit more about the tuition and fee structure for this program, since it's an online option for our postmaster students?
Yes. Well, first, the big exciting thing to know about is because it is a distance learning program, there are no out-of-state fees assessed for students attending this. So even if you're not living here in the state of Ohio, you'll effectively pay what our Ohio residents are paying. The fee structure is per credit hour. There's a collection of tuition and fees that are assessed at per credit hour up to 8 credit hours. So if you take more than 8 credit hours, you still only ever pay up to 8 credit hours. So each semester may vary in terms of your overall bill, depending on exactly how many credit hours you take, and that can vary depending on whether you're part-time or full-time. But that's what you're roughly looking at. I think I want to say like a full-time semester of graduate nursing coursework is somewhere in the neighborhood of around $7,500 for a full-time semester. Obviously, it's going to be less than that once you go down to part-time and take less credit hours.
Great, thank you. Dr. Masciola, I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit more about how the classes are offered, since it is an online program.
So our classes are offered in the evening. And so they've been hovering right around Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday evenings. Usually, if you're a first-year student, we try to keep those down to just 1 or 2 nights. As our program is going, we're adding more sessions, which is very exciting. It offers a lot more dynamic teamwork and a lot more partnerships, a lot more discussion. And you would log into our internet-based service. We call it Carmen, and that is where class is attended is online. So you log in, there may be a lecture that day, there could be discussion, there could be assignments due, there could be a presentation due. Each class is about 2 hours long, an hour and a half to 2 hours long. It's a 2 credit hour class, and most of our cores are about 2 credit hours. And so in part-time, you might take 2 a semester, so 4 to 5 credit hours if you're in the part-time program. And so you may be online on a Thursday night for 3 or 4 hours. And that would be weekly through the semester. So again, you do not have to ever come. And that has been a huge perk for many of our out-of-state students, obviously.
Great. Doug, can you tell us what the due date is for our application that's currently open?
Yes, we are still accepting applications for the Postmasters DNP program up through May 15th for the 2019-2020 school year, so starting in autumn. So yeah, still open through May 15th. All of the different application components we mentioned earlier, those all need to be submitted by that deadline. But yeah, if you're interested in starting in August, you can still get an application in. And then if that's a little too early for you, our applications for the following school year, 2020-2021, will open in August and continue through all of next year. So
Wonderful. And who should they contact if they have questions?
Oh, you can contact me. Well, our recruitment and admissions team. The best way to get answers to questions is by email, and that is nursing@osu.edu. Myself and several of my colleagues monitor that inbox pretty constantly, so it's a great way to get questions to a lot of different answers. And if we don't know them, we can always connect you with the people who do. So.
Those are all the questions that I had.
Okay. I want to thank Dr. Masciola for being here with us today, and thank all of you for joining us. And if you do have questions that something you just didn't think of right now, or I definitely encourage you to take a look at our website. There's lots of information on the Doctor of Nursing Practice program and all of our various programs out there. And yeah, please feel free to reach out to us. Again, that's nursing@osu.edu for any questions you have after today. So yeah, thank you again for joining
Thank you for
us.
having me.